especially in those moments when you're constrained with time, sometimes a couple of minutes you have, especially if they're celebrity, they're there for a second and then they're on to the next, right? How do you in those kind of micro moments build that rapport enough to get enough out of them for for a good photo?
You make them forget about photography is the answer. So what I'll usually do is I just, hey TJ,
Hey man, how you doing?
good. You can hear me okay?
Yeah, you sound great. You look
Okay.
great too. How you been doing?
Thank you. You look great too, man.
Why,
I've been
thank you.
great.
There's a
So
whole lot of great in there.
there is. So are we live now or will we start in a few moments?
Well, I'm just recording, but I don't post it
Sure.
live, so I just I'll edit it and then I'll post afterwards. So yeah.
Sounds like a plan. Great. So I've just got my laptop open here as well too, in case we need to look at anything. I've been having a look at your work. It looks great, man.
Oh, cheers, thanks.
Yeah. I like, there was a shot that you took by a river, and I just can't remember the name of the river, but I quite like that shot. You've got nice depth in there with the rocks in the foreground, and then you've got the
Oh,
river.
that's yeah, that was Little Smoky River. And that's
Yes.
actually
Yes.
we're really lucky. Our garden, we have a garden over at a friend's house, and that's actually on his property.
Okay.
And just like 2 minute walk down the hill from the garden. And so I was there doing some photography last summer and walked down there and very rarely I'm kind of a night hawk, so very rarely am I up super early. But that was actually sunrise or close enough to sunrise where I went down there and got that shot there. And it was just kind of a I don't want to call it a throwaway shot. Like I didn't really plan on doing anything spectacular that day, and just took the pictures and just kind of filed them away. But they end up coming back time and time again as for an image that people really like. So yeah, thanks
It's
for that.
it's funny how that happens sometimes, isn't it? Where, we take photos thinking, oh, maybe this is something that I might use later. And then you get it back and you realize, wow, this is a really great shot. It turned out, better than I thought it would. I wasn't expecting it. Sometimes those are the best moments.
Yeah, and those ones in particular, there's three or four of them that I shot, but there's the one that I usually post. But I edited it on Lightroom Mobile, so I had my phone, and that was before they had like any of the great masks and stuff like that. So, and I was still kind of like learning how to use the app,
Right.
so not even like a spectacular edit, and like not my favorite photo, but seems to strike a chord with people. So yeah, it's the town where I live, so it's really beautiful. I'm really happy that people are getting to see,
Yeah.
the beauty of northern Alberta.
It really stood out to me because I love nature photography and anything to do with, water. And again, I like the depth that you had in that shot. So you're in northern Alberta now. We haven't caught up for a while. Tell me about it.
Yeah. Oh, it's the greatest place on earth. you know,
I agree.
uh, yeah, if you can get over the cold, which
Yeah.
isn't that big of a deal. And actually, the thing about cold weather and people that live in it is it tends to kind of bring out a heartier stock of individual. And, people that are, I don't know, kind of vacuous, shallow people don't really come up to here because, it's too cold and too harsh for them. So it attracts a certain type, I think. And, the Albertan type and the type of person I've really fallen in love with, my wife and I, as we've come out here. So I love it out here. Scenery is obviously gorgeous. I love the Western culture with, rodeos, agriculture, the energy sector, all this kind of stuff up here is really, really fascinating. And the one thing that we noticed, even in Edmonton, when we lived there prior to up north, just absolutely enormous skies. I mean, the same sky here as it is in Ontario, but just everything here feels bigger.
Yeah, I agree because Sean and we were out west in the summertime. And so we went to Calgary, we went to Red Deer, we went to Edmonton, and a lot of little towns all along the way. And it's just beautiful out there. Like you mentioned, I wanted so bad to make it out to the Badlands. But
Oh
unfortunately, with
yeah,
our itinerary, we didn't have time. I wanted to get out there with my camera. But this is a good thing because when we go back, now I know that I can hook up with you.
oh
I'll have a
yeah.
camera with me, and we'll have to get out to the Badlands together and shoot some
It's
stuff.
Peter. I could take you. So I started a tour company called Prairie View Photo Tours.
Yeah, I
Uh,
saw it. I mean, looking at
yeah,
it online. Yeah.
for just that purpose, right?
Yeah.
And it actually started when Kat and I went on our honeymoon in Ireland, and we had friends that kind of took us on this curated little private tour around the Ring of Beara. And I was like, wouldn't it be so cool to, as a photographer, you land somewhere and you have someone that just knows all the hot spots to go to, and maybe kind of the lesser known ones, because you get the Banff and Jasper. Jasper's better than Banff for this, but just the tourist traffic is so much. So, it'd be nice to kind of have some epic spots that really nobody knows about. And so that was kind of the focus when it came to Alberta, was like, look, this whole place is so beautiful. Maybe that's, I thought this was a good place for that kind of business model, right? To get photographers out here and take them on like custom curated tours to like the spots where nobody really kind of knows about.
I think it's a great idea. I mean, it's we were just blown away by the nature out there.
Oh yeah.
It's too bad that it's taken us so long in life to actually get out there, but I'm so glad that we did. And of course, we went to the tourist spots just because we didn't have a lot of time when we were there. We were working, etc. But we did go to Jasper, and we did go to Banff. Banff was really incredible. I actually did include one photo out of the 10 photos I sent you. One of them is from Banff, and it's quite a nice shot. But I was inspired by that area. It's just gorgeous.
Yeah, it's the cool thing about Banff and Jasper, in fact, and a lot of the mountains here is like, you don't have to be some experienced hiker or something to go. Like the mountains themselves, the wildlife around them are super accessible. Wildlife almost too accessible sometimes. People get a little bit comfortable around the wildlife because they're just so prevalent. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It's a beautiful, beautiful province, beautiful country, and yeah, again, very accessible. So you can just, well, I'm going to repeat myself. I say you can access it from anywhere. It's just easy to get to, easy to interact with, and just really, really friendly for someone that wants to come and get some great great landscape or wildlife photography.
Yeah, I agree. So yeah, thanks for having me on the podcast.
Hey, thanks for coming.
Yeah, let me, whatever you'd like to talk about, let me know.
Well, John, it's been a while since I've seen you, talk to you. Yeah. For the audience out there, John and I are friends. I met John, I want to say in 2010, actually, 2010, 2011, when I was training a Muay Thai, and he and a friend were looking for kind of a martial arts model for a mixed martial arts convention they're going to. They're going to market their photography to people in that field. And so that's kind of how we got connected, through a friend. And just really appreciated John, as you're going to get a sense if you haven't already. He's a super nice guy, and just really, really beautiful soul, and really a great photographer. And if we fast forward a few years, I actually, when I got married in 2017, John was, it was just a pleasure for us to have him as our wedding photographer. And so took some amazing photos that we absolutely cherish. And actually, maybe John, maybe you can just start. Tell us about you. Tell us how you even got into the photography in the first place. Like, when was the first time you picked up a camera? What inspired you to do that? And kind of what was that process like for you as you went from first picking up a camera to, making it your career?
Yeah, sure. How far would you like to go back? The story goes back pretty far.
Yeah, go start at the beginning.
Well, I'd say it's a long story, but let me try and give the condensed version. So I went to high school. I was in grade 9, and first day of high school, and all of a sudden, looking through the program, I realized that the high school I went to, they offered photography program. So I just thought this was awesome. I thought this was great. I knew I wanted to take a lot of like the arts classes and whatnot. So I saw you have to wait until grade 10 to take it. So that was the only bummer about it. But anyway, so I signed up. I waited until grade 10. I took this class, and I absolutely loved it. I mean, they taught a lot of fundamentals of photography. The particular high school I went to in Burlington, Ontario, had one of the best photography programs in all of Canada. They had full dark rooms. So I was just really pleased that I took this class, and I thought, wow, I can keep taking these classes. Sure. Because then there was another one in grade 11, and then yearbook photography. And I just fell in love with it. The assignments were great. I loved being out with my camera. I loved the assignments that they would challenge you. They'd have to make you think about what it is that you actually want to take. And then, of course, all the technical end. So then from there, I just continued with photography. And then I found out, hey, there's a co-op that I can take, and I can get credits for it in high school. So the co-op was with the local newspaper, part of the Toronto Star Corporation, the Burlington Post. And I ended up doing the co-op there. And the first day that I showed up for the co-op, 3 photographers had quit. So the main photographer who hired me for the co-op basically said, look, I don't have time to babysit anyone. I need someone who can go out and start shooting right away. So I got kind of thrown out from day one, sink or swim. And I've just been very fortunate because it seems like in my whole entire career, things like that have happened to me where I've had an opportunity, and it's worked out well for me. So that turned into almost like a 10-year career working for media, working for newspapers, magazines, etc. You kind of break in the business, and then there's lots of opportunities. You meet lots of different people. And then from there, after that 10 years of doing there, then I knew that I had made enough clients and I had established myself enough that I started going out on my own with my own business. And then that led into a lot of things like weddings and corporate work. And so I would say photography for me developed as a passion, something that I love doing for the artistic portion of it. But somewhere along the line, it became this career, which I really enjoy. And today, that's why I'm so excited we're talking about Alberta, because I'm finding here I am, I started in 92, my career, and here I am all these years later and thinking, I'd like to get back to the roots of photography, get out with my camera, start photographing a lot of, just like landscapes and beautiful scenery. Because during my career as a photographer, you quite often are running from city to city, place to place, and you don't always get all of the time to focus on the artistic part of it and the personal part of it. So in a nutshell, that's kind of where I am with photography. And it's like right now I feel after the pandemic, there's been a little bit of a renaissance, a resurgence, where I've had time to many of us have had time to reflect during that time. So I've had more time to get out with my camera and trying to focus more on the artistic part of photography.
That's awesome. You just triggered something in my mind. I didn't plan on asking you, but you said post-pandemic renaissance. And we have the advent now of AI and AI art that's getting really, 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 really good.
Right.
My theory is that, it's obviously it's here to stay. It does a great job. And maybe you mentioned corporate photography, maybe for certain things, product photography or corporate photography, maybe human kind of the more expensive human photographers might be less and less utilized. But I think there's going to be a very strong niche for kind of actual human created, human generated art rather than AI generated art. Do you have an opinion on that?
Sure. That's a great question. I sure hope so. I think about that a lot. And it's funny that you bring that up because this last 2 or 3 weeks have been extremely busy for me. I've been going from city to city doing many different types of jobs. And I had a new corporate client. I was in Niagara Falls on the weekend. And this exact conversation came up. How much is there going to be a need for an actual person doing photography, and how much will be replaced by AI? And, I've had some time to think about it. And I think there's a certain part of photography that will maybe, I don't want to use the word never, but maybe won't be replaced. But there will be a certain amount of elements of photography that is replaceable. For instance, things like headshots. I'm seeing now there's AI software where you can take a basic headshot against a white wall, and it will just do all of the work and, change all the lighting, make you look great, put a nice backdrop in. So things like that are certainly going to, in the future, be more accessible for people. But TJ, when you're up early in the morning or late at night and you're waiting for that perfect moment for the sunset to go, there's just nothing like it. You're like in this meditative zone. And for things like corporate photography, I suppose maybe at one point, if we get to the point with robots where they're able to go around with their camera and utilize AI, maybe that would change things. But for right now, thankfully, in my lifetime of what I have left of it, hopefully there's enough to keep going around where we can still have merged the two of utilizing AI in a way that is helpful, but still having the photographer and the actual person doing the work and utilizing all of their talents and abilities.
You mentioned that about getting up earlier, getting that perfect sunrise, or out here, being out at 3 a.m, doing a time lapse of the auroras that are beautiful, and just realizing that, the countdown is on, you're not getting any sleep tonight, for the sake of the shot. And all those are so worth it. And for me, there's like two categories for photography in that case. There's photography as a product and photography as a practice, right? Right. That photography is photography for you as the photographer. Like it's an artistic practice, it's a meditative practice, or whatever the case is, for you and for your own personal satisfaction. And AI can never replace that, even if they can come up yeah, I mean, they can come up with a beautiful sunset that looks so amazing and might be at some point indistinguishable from reality, but you didn't get that experience of actually doing that. And there's some reward there. So I don't think photography as a practice, I think it's never going away. Um, but yeah, I think, and then also you mentioned wedding photography, right? Like there's certain things that you'd rather have captured than not created, right? Like an actual event. You want to know that this was an actual event that actually happened. It was actually a moment that was actually snapped or frozen in time.
Right.
I'm sure AI can recreate it, but it's not genuine. And there's a value in that.
There is. That's a really great point, because when it comes to wedding photography, I was doing a lot of wedding photography, especially earlier in my career. I'm not doing as much now, just simply because pandemic changed a lot of things and whatnot. And I've gone a little more to the corporate end. But with wedding photography, I always tell my clients, for me, I had more of a photojournalistic background. So I'm capturing those true moments as they really happen, as they've experienced. And capturing those true moments of a moment that happens, will that be replaceable by AI? Maybe at some point it might be, but I think what the couple really enjoy about the moment is the truth that it actually happened and they experienced it.
Mm-hmm.
And who is to say, or who knows in the future how things will be, or how social cultures might change. But for right now, that's a really valuable thing, capturing that true moment of the day. And quite often when I give pictures back to couples, a lot of times they might even be crying because they saw an image that I photographed that they themselves didn't see me capturing. And they'll be like, "Oh, you got that moment. That I can't believe that you captured that moment." So, but these will be many challenges going forward, not just in photography, but everything. Like, where is AI going to fit in? How much is it going to replace human beings? And what part of human beings are still going to be able to, be needed and not be too replaced by AI? So this is maybe a more of a generalized challenge that we're facing right now, even though AI is very helpful in many ways.
So we'll see in some of the images as we come across them in a bit. How,
Sure.
like you mentioned that capturing those moments, that specific moment that, we thought nobody was looking at, and you caught that. And but
Yeah.
the same is true of our wedding and our wedding photos. One of my favorite photos was a moment I didn't even realize you were even there, right?
Nice.
And it's actually here. I'll show you. I imported it into the chat here. This one.
Oh yeah.
Right. So that's actually my favorite photo from the entire day. And and had no idea you were capturing it. So how did you learn to see through your camera this way? How did you learn to compose and capture the moment perfectly? How did you learn to do that from the offset? Like, was it through your schooling? Was it through more just going out and doing more shooting and more shooting? Did you study people's work and kind of mimic what they did? What was your kind of learning process to get as good as you are today?
Oh, that's a great question, TJ. And thank you for bringing that shot up. I have to say that's actually my favorite shot from the wedding as well, too. That one, and of course the image at the very end where you all had the what do you call it? Like the sparklers? Yeah, you've got it. You're on it. You're good, man.
Yeah, man. You got the black one, black and white version of that. Is actually a big canvas over top of our mantle right now. So that's pretty cool.
Oh, nice. Yeah. And I have to tell you, the reason why I like that second shot so much is because out of all the years of doing photography, fireworks many times, but I think that's the first time actually somebody brought sparklers. And I wanted to do that shot for so many years. And I thought about it, and I had done it, back when I was in high school, I'd done shots like that. But when you guys told me you had the sparklers, I'm like, this is awesome. We're going to get this shot I've always wanted to get. So
that was Kat's idea.
And I want to give the credit to her because I remember her telling me about it. It was her idea. So coming back to the first shot, I do remember you two of you were having a moment. So a big part of my job, and I wouldn't necessarily say that I learned any of this really in school. And I forgot to mention, after high school, I did go to Sheridan College and study photography formally there as well too. And I learned so many fundamentals there. But what I found working for the newspaper and the media, when you get to an assignment, quite often you don't have a lot of time. Sometimes there might be, for instance, a politician or celebrity, what you're photographing, but sometimes you're sent in cold at an event and you have no idea what really is going to be going on at the event, but you have to get in and get a shot quickly and get out. So I developed this keen, I think many photographers do as photojournalists, sense of just at the very beginning, just walking around, observing, seeing what's going on, like almost having eyes in the back of your head, looking all around. seeing, what's happening there and what could be a moment that you might want to capture as well too. So on a wedding, I know that there's the standard shots that people want to get. And obviously the ceremony is a good opportunity for candid photos. But I'm always surveying, looking around, seeing what's happening around me, seeing if there's moments that are going to be great for photography that nobody actually wrote down on a shoot list. So with that particular moment, I remember looking over and the two of you were just having this really beautiful moment. I remember I was talking to someone else. I might have even been talking to your dad because I was talking to him a lot that day about a different type of topic. But I really enjoyed talking to him. And I remember just seeing the two of you having that moment. And I got my camera really quick and snapped it and got it. And it turns out to be one of my favorite shots as well, too.
Nice. Awesome. Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely true, right? Where you're heading into a scenario and you don't know what to expect or, what's going to be happening, but you got to produce the images, that's right. Yeah. Going in and kind of just sussing out first, like that really rings true, in my experience as well. So that's great advice for anybody that wants to go, that, wants to get into, shooting your weddings or shooting events or whatever the case is just to take that time at the beginning. Like you don't just run in and just start shooting, eh?
Exactly. And that's a great point. Like, especially for event photography, anything like corporate events, weddings, anything, if someone is hired as an event, quite often there's charitable events. I would just give the advice of new photographers, come up with an idea of what you might want to shoot, but be open to just observing as well too, because quite often you'll see things like the best shots I've found I've ever gotten at events are ones that I didn't plan to take. So that's I'll always try and find like a corner and kind of put my back to the corner a little bit and just survey the whole entire event as a whole as to what's going on. And there might be certain people that stand out, or there might be certain activities that are happening. Obviously in a wedding, I'm looking for that moment, like the picture you showed, where maybe the bride and groom are having just a moment together, away from photography, away from their guests, because those quite often are the true moments. And those are the ones I'm really seeking and shooting and looking for. And when I get those, I get really excited about them too, because I think to myself, hey, this is the reason I'm here. I'm here to try and capture these things. And it's a true moment. It's truthful. And people look at those pictures and that draws them into the picture as well too, because they can see themselves in the photo. And that's what really makes a wonderful photo.
I remember when I was asking you, it might have been when I was actually when I first picked up my camera. I had been bugging you a lot for some tips and tricks and advice and such. And also even as a business owner, I was in an entirely different business and asking you about just being a small business and independent entrepreneur. And you said to me something like, for the first 3 or 4 years when you ventured out on your own, it was a hustle, a lot of work on your end. But then after that, people started to contact you and the calls started to come in at that point. And, we talked about, how to manage that. So what I'm curious is, obviously your 10 years shooting for others, it kind of gave you or got your feet wet, but you can maybe hear my kids screaming in the background there. I certainly can. How did you make it those early years, those lean years when you went out on your own? Like, what was your process to get to being consistently booked?
Yeah. I was just very fortunate where, having done that co-op, I was just meeting so many people. So, Burlington is quite a large city, 200,000 people now. It's not a huge city. It's not Toronto, but it's not a small town. And so part of the job of me going out and working as a photojournalist is there was an advertising department. So I did a lot of advertising. So I met a lot of local business owners and photographing products. I met all of the local politicians, from the mayors to all the different town council. And then you just meet different people that have really incredible stories as a photojournalist as well too. So I think I was very young at the time. I was only 17 years old. So I wasn't really trying to go out and sell myself. I was just trying to do a really good job working for the community newspaper because they gave me an opportunity. But you start seeing a lot of different people in the circles, and you start getting to know a lot of people in the city and in the town. And just my personal story, what happened to me is people just started calling me, or I would be on an assignment somewhere and they might say, hey, I'm whatever, I'm having a birthday party on the weekend, I need a photographer. Do you do that type of thing? Or I would get the first wedding I photographed was just a friend of mine, and her sister was a lot older than we were. She's about 3 or 4 years old, which, when you're 17, someone who's 20 or 21 is like, they're so much older than you. And she said, I didn't know you. I don't know if you do weddings or not, but she's getting married and she just wants some pictures in her backyard after the ceremony. Do you think you could do that? So early on, I just said yes to a lot of things. I thought, what can it hurt? I'll take a whole bunch of film. I'll shoot it from different angles, and I'll listen to what the client wants or what the person wants, and I'll just try and do the best I can. And that was a big part of it. Is I talk about the observing part for events, but also like the listening part. The moment that one is being hired by somebody or they're being engaged by somebody to do a service, then it's no longer about what I want to do. It's more about what is their vision of what they want to have. So I really try to, from day one, listen to, okay, what do you want to have in this birthday party, or what pictures would you want to see in this wedding? And it just kept going from there. And I think my listening ability, it developed trust. And then from trust, people kept calling me back. So the time I got into 10 years of there, I had just established so many relationships with people, and they weren't necessarily business relationships. They were just relationships with people. And, for instance, here's a good example. I just photographed. I actually had another photographer of mine, colleague, photograph it because I was at another event, and it was for an 80th birthday party. And this is a really good example because I met her probably 10 years ago, and, we knew each other. She's a local store owner. And she just, 10 years later, it was her husband's 80th birthday party. And 10 years later, she thought enough to give me a call. So these are the type of things. It's almost like, a thing like karma, where if you're planting good seeds, then eventually they fruit and they develop, and then people will remember you if you left a little bit of an impression, if you had enough, sense to listen and to just try and be a good person, then it comes back to you. So I'd like to sit down and say, well, I wrote out this huge business plan and I saw this guru and he told me, or she told me to write out this business, but that's not how it happened for me. It just happened very organically and naturally.
It sounds like you're hitting on something very true. I've been doing a deep dive on Chris Do. I don't know if you know who Chris Do is on YouTube, The Future without an E on the end. And I was just watching a video the other day about building your personal brand. And he said that a personal brand, it's kind of like how you make people feel. He
Right.
said, if you, regardless of what you do, I can hear the clicking now. You're searching them.
I'm looking at, as you're talking, I'm looking him up. Yeah.
But yeah, he said, if you interact with someone and you're an ass or you're a jerk or you're rude or abrupt, then, well, that's your brand. That's the reputation you develop. And conversely, if you make someone feel good about themselves, you have a happy energy about you, you're encouraging, all those things that give us kind of those positive feelings. Well, that is then also your personal brand, because that's what they're gonna remember, and that's what they're gonna tell people moving forward. So yeah, how you interact with people and how you treat people is absolutely huge. And if you're an ass, then 10 years later, you're not going to be the one that gets the call.
I agree. And I mean, that's just generally in life, right? It depends how somebody is carrying themselves. And if they're not pleasant to be around, then who wants to be around that person, right?
That's right.
And, I've consistently got throughout the years, and I think this has probably been my greatest strength as a photographer, just because we're talking, in the scope of photography. People always say to me, like if they write a review or something, or they write a nice message, they say, you made me feel so comfortable. And I think that's the greatest strength for me of just how it's worked. Is the reason I've actually yielded a lot of work is just because people say, I felt so comfortable around you. I was hesitant in front of the camera, and I might not like how I look, but or there's things I want to change. But the minute we started shooting, I felt very comfortable, and I was able to open up. So that's another good point for new and emerging photographers if they're looking to do work beyond going out and shooting, naturescapes or these types of things of working with clients, is just really work on making the client feel comfortable, and really listen to their needs of what it is they expect and their expectations and what it is that they'll like. But of course, that's not for everybody. I meet a lot of people that approach me that want mentorship, and they're just want to learn how to take a better picture. Not everybody wants to get into the business of photography. So there's really those two. There's many areas of photography, but those are two main areas of just personal photography and wanting to improve, and then someone wanting to actually do photography as a career or as a business. So, but they have some overlap, making the subject feel comfortable. If someone is doing personal photography, making the subject feel comfortable is always a big part as well too, in capturing a true moment and getting the best emotion and expression out of that subject when there's camera awareness. Obviously, if there's candid, then like if you're shooting a sporting event or something like this, or a musician, then for a candid moment, then you just get to be a fly on the wall and look for the right moment that you like, with lighting and expression, etc., that tells the story.
When you talk about that, making your subject comfortable, how do you, like you said before, sometimes you got to get in and get out. You don't have a lot of time with this person. So especially in those moments when you're constrained with time, sometimes a couple of minutes you have, especially if they're a celebrity, they're there for a second and then they're on to the next, right? How do you in those kind of micro moments build that rapport enough to get enough out of them for for good photo?
You make them forget about photography is the answer. So what I'll usually do is obviously when I meet somebody, you can kind of see what they're into or what they like. And I'm just, I worked for the media, I think, for many reasons, because I'm a very curious person. So, if somebody's a celebrity or they're a musician or whatever the reason you're photographing for them for, you can always find some common ground of something that you like to talk about. Maybe they're wearing a hat. I mean, later on in life, you learn this about sales, but I'm not trying to sell anybody. I just like to hear about people and hear about their story. So you start talking about things, nothing to do with photography, and I just start taking pictures as we're shooting and kind of give them an opportunity for feedback back and forth. And that's, I found, the best way to make people comfortable is to have them forget what they're actually doing, what they're there for, doing the photography. For things like celebrities, they're usually very, very busy. You don't have much time with them. Anytime I was given a celebrity, or, I photographed a few prime ministers and so many celebrities over the years, sports figures. Quite often you'll get the PR person and they might say, with Mr. and Mrs. such and such, you're going to have, I've had them before say you have 45 seconds with them. They're very busy. So that's a good opportunity where I have to go in and think about the type of shot I want to do, because I'm only going to get a few shots very, very quickly. And same thing, I just try and build a rapport with them, try and talk to them about, maybe they're tired of talking about, business all the time, about their sports thing or their music. So maybe it's just something as, hey, how do you like Toronto? How do you like Canada? Like, it immediately opens people up to start having a dialogue. And then I just start shooting as we're talking. So I found that's one tip maybe in technique that has worked for me.
Awesome. That's actually great advice.
Yeah.
Make them forget about how you take good pictures and make them forget about the picture in the first place. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, sometimes you get people where they have a very good idea, like especially if they're in the celebrity or they're in the limelight, they're like, I want to be photographed this way or from this side, or I don't want to be photographed like this. And then that's when I'm like, okay, now we're talking photography. So let me just listen to what it is they want. Because if they're having their picture taken all of the time, they probably know better than I do, because they've done magazine spreads and online stuff. So then that's an opportunity where I can just go into listening mode and be like, sure, yeah, no problem, we can do that. But that makes people feel relaxed as well too, because I think a lot of times if we're talking about celebrities and sports figures, they're so used to coming up to a lot of resistance. And if I'm like, sure, yeah, we can do that, no problem, they're kind of like, oh, okay. Oh, like you're cool with it. Okay, sure. Yeah. And then immediately like that. And, I've never really thought about these things. It's just kind of how I've always been. And I guess my nature as a person. So thank you, TJ.
You can bother us and tell it. Yeah, exactly.
We'll talk off air. Okay. Maybe we can come up with something together.
That's right. One thing I wanted to ask you about your photography business is, and you already mentioned and touched on in the story here, that you've gone through photojournalism, working for the local paper, you've gone through corporate, you do weddings, all sorts of things. So how do you market yourself in terms of like a niche, or do you, and and if not, like, how do you successfully kind of balance between these genres of photography and make a successful go of it, especially nowadays when it seems to be so hypersaturated and everybody has like a specialty in something?
Sure. Yeah, that's a really good point. I'm doing a lot of things in an unconventional way because, so many photographers say and this is advice I would give too, find something within photography you're really good at and really focus on that niche or niche market. Like I follow some photographers where they just photograph vegetarian food, that cuisine. Like it's so specific, right? Because you'll be the person known for doing that and you'll get a lot of work in that field if you like it. Now, again, in my situation and story to your question, I started working at newspapers and, under the Toronto Star Corporation umbrella, and they kind of threw me out having me do everything. Food photography, advertising photography, people photography, stories, spot news. So I found early on, real estate, everything. So I found early on, I actually like the diversity of doing a whole bunch of different things, which is strange. Most photographers that you'll talk to that have done it any certain amount of time will say, oh, I like this and this, but I hate that and that. Or I don't do this and I don't do that. But, I don't do products. I don't do weddings, but I do family photos. But for me, I like the diversity of all of it. It makes it interesting for me. It makes it fun because they're all approached differently. So coming back to your question, what I did early on is I just noticed I was working for a studio on car law very early on in my career, as well as working for the media. And I noticed a lot of the studios were making two websites. They'd make one that's just strictly like commercial corporate, and then make another website that's just strictly like weddings and family. And it makes sense, right? Like people get married and then they have a family and then they have children. So it's like, you get to photograph the marriage, then the family as it grows, and then the children. So then you might get into some baby photography as well too. So it makes sense separating the two and having two different websites. And I just had two different business cards because it would look a little strange if I'm on a corporate job and I give someone a wedding card. And same thing, it would look strange if there's a bride or groom getting married and I gave them like a corporate card. So that's kind of how I've always separated the two. But I think honestly, for me now, where I am in my career, I've just been shooting for such a long time. People know me, and they might know me from the wedding world, or they might, obviously corporate work or commercial work, they know me from that world. But there has been a lot of crossover because a lot of folks where I photographed their wedding, a lot of them were in the corporate world. So then I'm at the age now where a lot of people have moved up in the corporate world, and there might be the director of communications, strategies, etc. And then they're like, hey, we really like John at our wedding. We'll give him a call. We'll give him a shot at this corporate event. If he can shoot weddings, he can probably do corporate events. So it's good, really giving my foot in the door of having all these different types of photography kind of all play and work off one another. But for those new budding photographers out there, I would probably say the best thing to do if you're really looking into do it as a career, or if you're looking to do it to make a little extra money on the side, is focus on one area at the beginning that you really love and just keep focused on that area.
What, just on a personal level, not as a career or professional level, what's your favorite thing to actually shoot? Like, what brings you the most joy when it's on the other side of your lens?
Well, I was just having this conversation with a colleague of mine. I really miss weddings. During the pandemic, I had gone from, back, TJ, when I photographed your wedding, I was photographing like 20 weddings a year, maybe 15. Years before that, I was doing 30, and then pandemic came, and I really realized how much I miss weddings. I photographed two or three this year. I just really enjoy them. It's been a big part of my life. As for what I really love photographing, it's kind of funny because what I really enjoy photographing, I don't photograph that much, which is scenery, taking my camera, going like what we were talking at the onset of the program, going out in the mountains, waiting for that sun to be perfect. That's what I really enjoy photographing. I don't get as much opportunity to do that. And then probably the thing I photograph the least is also the thing I enjoy doing probably most, which is like products and food. I do that, but I don't do that as much as I do like corporate events, commercial work, weddings, etc. And the main reason for that is, think about it, especially with products, you have all this time to get really creative, to think about different angles, to think about lighting, to try different, situations you wouldn't be able to before. When it comes to events, you just don't have the time. You have to keep going, keep moving, keep shooting, the keynote speaker, then there might be some breakout sessions you have to get to. So you're just running the whole time. So I always love it when I get the opportunity to photograph some still life products, And then, of course, the wonderful thing about food is if you go into like a restaurant and the chef makes you this beautiful cuisine, because for him or her, it has to be perfect for the images, then you get to enjoy it and eat it after as well, too. So it all works out well. And again, with food, you have not so much with, it depends, if the food needs to be like hot, then you might have limited time. But if it's something that like a salad or something, or pizza, then or whatever it is, then you have time to play around with the lighting and really work on ways of becoming creative and artistic. And when I went to Sheridan College, the first year you're just using like triangles and rectangles and sphere cylinders, because you're learning how to light them properly. So all of that training I had at Sheridan College in college really came in useful when it comes to product photography.
I find product photography, I've tried my hand at it, and it is just, it's just like so meticulous and so challenging. When you look at some lipstick or, set of AirPods or cell phone or shoes or whatever the product is, and it just looks like the simple nothing. But man, I don't wish product photography on anybody, and that is like torture to try and get a good image. Really, really challenging. Do you find that as well?
It's an art in itself. And I mean, that's why hats off to all those photographers out there who specialize in product photography, and, the ones that are doing like cars and things as well too. It really is challenging trying to get, when you're working with reflections as well too. So everybody knows that the secret, especially with smaller products, is just to shoot everything intense, which is just, you can buy them and then basically the camera is just in one small area. You can light it different ways. But it depends. I think a lot of photography of the types of products I shoot, I'm comfortable with now because I've been shooting them for such a long time. But when you start getting into things like I mentioned, like cars and bigger things like this, there's a lot of challenges. So there's certainly always going to be a lot of technical aspect of it. But what's cool about it is you have all this time to play around with the lighting and try different things as well too, if you're not on too much of a deadline, obviously.
On product photography, on food photography, on shooting people, one of the things I love about shooting weddings is I'm very much like you in the sense that I like shooting a lot of things. Like I think if I get pigeonholed, I get bored, and if I'm just shooting one thing, then I lose my interest. So I like the variety. And shooting weddings, although is a specific thing, you get so many different types of shooting on that day. You get your photojournalistic style, you get your pose family portraits, you get your food, you get your product, you get low light, you have different, so many different challenges and things. Then on top of that, you're probably doing some video as well. And so it's really, really exciting, and you get to interact with so many different people. So on weddings, because like you said, you did 15, 20 weddings, 30 weddings a year at your height until lockdowns happened. If someone wants to break into wedding photography as a business, what would you say if you were to give them like a master class in a 5-minute master class here? What would you say would be the key things to do to pursue wedding photography as success and to be a success at it?
Sure. I mean, the advice I would give is first, just go and shoot a few weddings and make sure that you like it and it's for you. And probably the best way, if someone doesn't have experience with actually photographing weddings, is find a company or a mentor photographer in your city or area and just ask to come along and shoot a few weddings. Photographers will almost always, bring someone on if they need someone. I've always done it myself. I'll mentor students if they want to learn. They have a little bit of a background of photography, and you can come along as a second or third, shooter. And then you can just first see if it is something you enjoy. And the reason I'm suggesting starting with that, I have brought a few people out with me before, and they were keen on shooting weddings and wanted to break into shooting weddings. And after 2 weddings, they're like, I don't think this is for me. I'm glad I came out, because you know what, this just isn't really my thing of what I want to do. One fellow who's a friend of mine, he got into real estate, and he's become a really great real estate photographer. He loves it. It's good money, it's good community. People are always looking for new homes. So that would be the first advice, is just try a few out, but don't put too much pressure on yourself where you're going to go out and have the weight of the world on your shoulders, having to photograph this huge wedding if you've never done it before. And then from there, if it's something that you enjoy doing and you say, yeah, I can see myself doing this, maybe I would take more on, just keep getting experience. That's what I had done. I'd worked for a company at the very beginning after that first wedding I shot. And I worked with them for 2 years and photographed about 45 weddings a year with them as the second shooter. And then they sent me out on some weddings on my own once there was some trust there and they enjoyed my work. I had more of a photojournalistic style. So they had actually created a package where couples could buy back in the early 90s, where it was like they'd have more of a photojournalistic approach rather than such a huge traditional approach, which was popular at the time. And then from there, if someone has gone out and they've worked with a company for a year or two and they feel confident and they really like it, then start working on your own work. You'll have a little bit of a portfolio you can build. It's easy to start an Instagram account. And you'll find that once people find that they know that you're a photographer and you do weddings, you'll start having family and friends reach out to you. And then, as long as you have enough confidence in that, then I would say go for it. But just don't try and rush into it. I've heard a lot of stories from couples where they're like, oh, a friend of mine, he's into photography and he shot a few weddings. So we had him do the wedding and, we weren't happy with the photos just because this person didn't have a lot of experience. So there's a little bit of buyer beware there too on both ends, from the perspective of the client who's booking someone and then perspective of the photographer. And I've seen photographers that have had to like bail at the last minute just because they realized that, they booked the wedding a year in advance and like a week before the wedding, they realized, I'm getting cold feet. I don't know if I can do this. So I don't want to say names, but I've had a few people contact me that are friends in the past, like a week before the wedding, and being like, John, I was going to shoot this wedding, but I'm having second thoughts now. Are you available? And thankfully I'm being available. So.
Have you, whether it be weddings, whether it be corporate, whatever you happen to be shooting, have you ever had to fire a client, and how have you tackled that, if so?
Oh man, that's a great question. Yeah, you're a good interviewer, TJ.
Cheers. Thanks.
No, you really are. That's a really good question. I was thinking about that the other day. So again, I'm very good and easygoing, and I can think of maybe clients I wanted to fire, but I've never actually had to do it, because also the beautiful thing about being freelance or having your own business is it's a partnership. So if you take a client on and for whatever reason it's not working, then, you can easily, just after you've done your commitment of whatever job you booked with them or whatever few jobs, just say, you know what, it's not working for me. I can suggest this other photographer in my place. Or probably when I worked for the newspaper, there were more, but because they were accounts that we had for advertising, it's not like I didn't have any choice where I could fire them or whatnot. Some of the car dealerships I went to, honestly, won't name names, but some of them were a little challenging to work with, because it's a very, it's a very competitive business. And sometimes they wouldn't really give you the time of day as a photographer. And I was young at the time also, which was working against me, very young. So there were actually, the only time I can think of, there was one account that I had to leave just because they weren't respecting the time, but it wasn't even so much that they just were not very kind in that. But in all the years of photography, maybe that was just a very small example. I haven't really had too many. People always ask me the bridezilla question. How many bridezillas have you had, or do you get bridezillas? There's probably many, and I probably have had a few, but I think it's more my attitude, because when I go in, I just think this is the couple's day, and it's not about me, it's about them. It's about me trying to be as professional as I can and to capture the images that they want to get, that they're going to like. And, frankly, if I didn't gel with the bride or the groom, I don't have to see them ever again after the wedding once they get their pictures. So it kind of works out very well. And there's a lot of photographers that have these, horror stories. I don't really have that many, fortunately, thankfully. And I would just say, though, same thing like we were talking about earlier on. Just try and be a good person. Try and do the best work you can. Try and have integrity, and it's not always going to be roses, but maybe if you can get that happening 60 or 70% of the time, then you're good.
I mean, I think also you have a high level of emotional intelligence, which is going to be an asset in this industry for sure.
Yeah, that's
And
true.
I think probably when you're doing your initial interview with the client, whoever that may be, or initial customer reaches out to you, you can probably suss out whether they're going to be miserable to work with or whether they're going to be great to work with. And you can do a lot of the hard work by just, quitting before you start, kind of thing.
It's true, man. You know what? That's so true about the emotional intelligence. And that's the thing. I mean, everybody has different types of intelligence, right? And for me, I would definitely have a high emotional intelligence. So, I mean, there's this thing about archetypes too, right? Like in when you're getting, people that are in HR and job search and that type of thing, like archetypal personalities where
Mm.
I will meet people and I always would have not so much now because of the digital age. Like here we are, you're in Alberta, I'm in Ontario, and we're talking over the internet. But especially back in the day, I would always have like an hour consultation with clients
Mm.
at my studio, which was my home, but my home was set up more of a studio, even though there was a room for me to sleep in. And I would just really get a feel for the clients that would come in. And, sometimes there would be that little resistance where you think, I don't know, maybe this isn't going to be the best wedding for me to take on. But it didn't happen that often. I would just try and find similarities. And, everybody's into things, they're into something.
Mm.
So you just find out what the person is into. You start talking about that. Sometimes, the guys would come in, not all the time guys, but some guys would come in and be more into like, oh, I have all these ideas for, I want to get a shot with my car and I got this great car and everything. So that if he's getting really excited about that, I get excited because I'm like, oh, that's going to make for a great shot. Right. So, and then with the ladies, they come in and they have a lot of ideas of, what they want their centerpieces to look like and the dress and everything. So it's pretty easy if you stay on those subjects to build a nice rapport. But yeah, the emotional intelligence is a huge part of it. And maybe that's why I'm still in photography all these years later, because I'm able to utilize that with meeting people. But it's also just that I'm a people person. I like people. And if someone isn't a people person, then maybe they want to get into products or they want to get into wildlife or they want to get into nature photography, because I do meet a lot of photographers who are not people, and they're more into like more the technical side of photography as well too. So there's something there for everybody.
What type of light do you prefer to shoot in? Like between studio lighting, natural lighting? Do you bring flashes with you? Like what's your preferred lighting setup, or do you have a signature style? Like what's your bag? What's your bag for lighting?
Sure. I mean, who isn't about golden hour, man? No, but I've always made my style like a free flowing photojournalism. And being a photojournalist early on in my career, especially shooting things like hockey and hockey games and whatnot, it was always about shooting fast film and shooting available light. So the answer to that question is available light. When I go on a wedding, I try and shoot almost the whole day in available light if I can. Mm-hmm. Now, obviously, when I'm getting into the hall, if you're in a really dark hall and it's like, I mean, here we are at 5:00 or whatever, and it's pitch black outside. But if we're in a hall like that, I'll put a kicker light in the corner and use that, just a strobe light that I can use radio slaves off of. But generally, most of the time, I try and shoot where it's available, just available light, because that's how you get the emotion, you get the mood. So I'm talking strictly for events and weddings and those types of things right now, where I can. And, outdoor lighting, just natural ambient lighting, and of course, moody lighting. So like early in the morning, late at night, a lot of natural lighting, utilizing windows. When you go to the bride's house, some of the best pictures that I feel that I take that the bride likes, I'm just using the available light available in a window. You can put her, or if it's the groom, you can put him. You can put the person just like by the available light and of the window. And there's so many ways of utilizing that. And I think, again, that comes back to my journalistic training where I'd have to come into places very quickly and I didn't have time to set up lights. When I was working for the media, sometimes they'd give me assignments where I had to be in and out in 20 minutes and get to the next assignment, sometimes even less. So I just didn't have the time to be carrying around strobe lights, setting them up. I do keep like a good size flash that I can use if I have to throw that on. And even with that, I usually have it off camera. And then I'll just bounce it in a corner. Like I can put it down somewhere on a table or something. And then I can experiment with getting different type of lighting, backlighting, side lighting, etc. And then it's like almost like utilizing available light without it being available light. back in the day when I first started shooting weddings, things were more traditional. So we were using like Hasselblad with loading backs, and we were using Metz flashes. And they're a lot of fun when I have the time, but realistically, most of the events, I just don't have the time for that. So available light when I can. And then if I have to, like the event I was at on the weekend, I just put a strobe up in the corner that's out of people's way. But even like I just photographed the Humboldt Broncos story, right? I mean, so much people in Canada know this story. Yeah. It was tragic what happened to them. And I was so fortunate because one of the members of the Humboldt Broncos was the keynote speaker, and Caleb, and he was just amazing. He was taking this experience and making it how it was so tragic in the whole country, and people all over the world were watching this thing. For those that don't know the story, maybe out of country, this bus in Saskatchewan crashed, and it slipped on some ice and hit a truck, or that's not the exact story, but something like that. And a whole bunch of this hockey team perished in this tragic accident. So anyway, talking about Caleb, bringing that story up, I was coming back to the photography portion of it. His talk was so inspiring, but I didn't want to distract the people that were listening, hanging on the edge of their seat, him telling his story and giving this positivity of his message as the keynote speaker. So here's a good example where the strobe would have worked technically, but I didn't want to be distracting people, bang, 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 hitting the strobe off every time when he's giving dramatic pauses, and he's such an engaging speaker. And I go to so many of these events where there's keynote speakers, and I could see people were very interested in the story. So I turned the strobe off, and I just used my 80 to 200. It's a 2.8. And fortunately, there was some nice lighting coming, like theater lighting. And I just stood back with a monopod, and I shot the whole thing that way. So I also stood back enough that the click of the camera wouldn't be distracting to the audience. So again, it's like just being mindful of what it is you're photographing. And I met Caleb after and talked to him, and he's a great guy. And, even the people at the event were saying, it was great you photographed it that way because you weren't distracting us with your strobe when we're hanging off every word, and we essentially want to hear his story. So it's knowing your audience as well, too, as a photographer. If there's other events where it's just too dark, then I might just try and go to the back of the room and maybe shoot a few shots off with the strobe, and then try and get as close as I can, just bend down a little bit with a long lens and just try and be very discreet. In any type of event photography, I really, really try to be as discreet as possible. And I'll tell a funny story. It's a funny story. Early on in my career, related, I went and photographed Robert Bateman. And for those in Canada, a lot of us know Robert Bateman. He's a very, very well-known, famous artist. He's a really nice guy as well, too. I met him a few times. And he's originally he taught at the school in my hometown of Burlington, but I believe he lives out on Salt Spring Island now. But anyway, I was photographing him, and it was at a library, and it was in a pitch black room. It was completely dark. There was no light in the room because he was doing a slideshow presentation. So I always remember the story because I had to get the shot, and it was one of those examples where I had like 10 minutes to get in and get out. So I'm like, what can I do in this situation? It's completely dark. I mean, even back in the day, 3200 ISO film is not going to do anything. Yeah. So I made the decision. I'm like, I'm just going to take like 2 or 3 shots with flash. And I'm going to take them like not close to one another, wait 5 minutes in between, and then I'll leave. And I got to the 3rd shot. I got the shot I needed. And then I was just about to walk out the door. And he's like, could the person, shooting those pictures with the flash, please turn your flash off in front of everyone? And everyone kind of looked over at me. And I said, thank you. I'm good. I got the shot I need. I'm just leaving anyway. And he's like, all right. So I tell that story because it's like, what do you do when you have to get a shot, but you can't? And, I was very young at the time. That was it was my first year as a photojournalist. So I realized after what I could have done is I could have just set up a shot after with him with his paintings. But then I couldn't do that because I had to leave and get to another important assignment. So that was a case where I had to make that call of either coming back empty-handed to the editor with no shot, which they would not be happy about when you're working for an editor and you come back. Sometimes you can get away with it, but I just made the decision in that time to be very discreet about it, and I got what I needed, and I wasn't too distracting. So that's for any of those new photographers out there. Always be mindful of that as well too. Flash is distracting when if it's a press conference, it's different. or if you're on the red carpet or at TIFF festival or something, then that's fine too. They're expecting that, but try and be mindful of that as well too.
You also said 3200 film, right? Now you have digital
Yeah.
cameras that can do a lot more. You can see right in the
Sure.
back of your camera what you're getting, so you know if you got the shot or not. And you can push it really far too, right? Like whereas you
Right.
didn't really know what you had before. So you just had to, take a few shots for safety and yeah,
Yeah.
man.
That's exactly it. Because like when I first started working for the media, we were using it was like TX, I think it was called, and it was a film that was very forgiving to push and to pull. So I would try and shoot at 1600 ISO back then, and then develop the film in a way so it's not so grainy. But that kind of 3200 very grainy look was acceptable back then because you didn't really have much choice back then before digital cameras. This was way even before the digital revolution kind of came into play. So you'd be running back to the newspaper, with like 4 or 5 rolls of film and trying to develop them as quickly as you could to try and make the deadline for the night for the paper. It wasn't a daily paper I worked for. It was, they published 3 times a week. But on a Tuesday night or on a Friday night, you were under the gun, or a Thursday night to get it done. So a lot of times you just had to make decisions and try and do the best you can with the lighting conditions or the time that you had. And again, I think for me, that really ingrained a style for me that has stayed with me my whole life, because I can't come from a style where get in, get the shot fast, get good quality shot though, because you're always thinking front page. You get in big trouble if you come back with a shot that's mediocre, because they're looking for every shot to potentially be like a front page image. And I understand it. You're selling newspapers. Back then it was actually physical newspapers. So I get it. But I'm really thankful, because it was almost like maybe someone who goes in the military and they develop these very good habits by repetition. And I've developed all these very good habits by repetition of being able to look, being able to hear, being able to watch, being able to get the shot quickly, and being able to do it without too much technical lighting. So now there's times when I have a lot of opportunity and time to set up the lighting and all of this time, then it's just like, it's fun for me. So I'm really grateful that I had that opportunity to do that at such a young age. So.
You mentioned shooting one of those events, shooting on a long lens with a monopod. And then you also mentioned like shooting fast and kind of the photojournalistic aspect of it. And I love that too. Like I love the jazz of just like being quick and fast, getting in, and just it's really, really exciting, right? It gets the heart going. When would you use a monopod or a tripod versus just standard? Like my preference is using nothing, because like to put any kind of stabilizer like that just slows me down. I don't like being slow. But when do you take the time to slow down, outside of obviously, I guess, like your nature shots where you have the time just to kind of compose a landscape? But when in a photojournalistic sense are you going to be using a monopod or a tripod? When and why?
Yeah, sure. So the monopod is essentially, you'll see any type of sporting events, you'll usually see it, especially if you're shooting with a very long lens, because it just gives a little more extra stability and stabilization using the monopod. And the advantage of the monopod is you can move it, left and right and all around quicker than you can with a tripod. Even with a ball head, you still have to turn a dial and position it with a ball head tripod. So I've always used a tripod for any type of sports. I always use a monopod for any type of keynote speakers, where I can just go more towards the back of the room, or the back of where the kind of tables are beginning, where the guests are seated, so I can be less distracting. It just gives more stabilization. It by the end of the night, your arms are not just killing you because you've been holding this huge lens that's heavy the whole entire time. And now you'll see, I think of something like basketball. You'll see the photographers that are right at the very, very front under the net, and they won't use a monopod because that would just be too distracting. And it would probably, for the NBA, maybe has a policy they don't want people using that. They'll just use more of like a longer, shorter lens, and maybe some wide angle lenses. But generally any sports other than that, I've always just used a monopod. So for tripod is really a good thing to use. Like here's a good example. I was just photographing at Queen's Park a group. And I like to use a tripod if there's a grouping where I know they're going to be seated and I'm going to set them up. So not so much at a wedding, but in that situation, it's easy for me to set the camera up and compose the shot exactly how I want. And then it gives my hands are free to go and to help position people where they need to be. And there were dignitaries there, etc. There were probably like 16 people in the shot. So that's where I always use a tripod, and that's strictly not even for stabilization, just to kind of keep the camera out of my hands. And then you would use the tripod again, obviously, if there's any type of like close-up photography, that would be helpful. A lot of nature photographers use it as well too. I should mention this as well too. I actually was very heavily, which many photographers are, inspired and influenced by Ansel Adams. And I would say I got into photography because of Ansel Adams. I loved his work. They say he's the founding father of Zone 5 photography. And when I was in college, we were using 4x5 cameras, the kind where you put the hood over your head that Ansel Adams was using. So he actually was the reason I got into photography, because I just enjoyed his work so much. So, the reason I'm kind of bringing that up is, here you think of Ansel Adams, he was known for always using his tripod for nature photography and scenic photography. And there's that famous picture of Ansel Adams that anyone at home can just kind of Google online. Ansel Adams shooting Half Dome in California. And he made a roof rack on top of his van. And it's a very famous shot. Maybe you can bring it up, TJ. And he's on top of his van with his tripod and his 4x5 camera, shooting one of his most famous images, which is called Half Dome in Yosemite in California. It's a beautiful, beautiful shot. So I was thinking of him when we were talking about tripods, because he was really the reason that I got into photography. And it's so funny, because that's probably the amount of photography I do the least amount of work in is nature photography. But I'm finding as I'm getting older, that's why I have this urge to travel a lot, and I'm trying to take my camera with me more often when I'm not working, and get more into the art of photography.
Here we go.
You see it there, TJ?
Yeah, I'm just gonna pull this up here.
Yeah, I'm gonna see if I can find it here too. And so there's just a beautiful shot here of Ansel Adams as well too that I'm looking at, that you'll probably be able to pull up. And he's also, Ansel Adams was I think a lot of his work was more from like the 50s and 40s. So he's even got this great old car that he's standing on as well too. I don't know the make and model.
This one right here. That's
the shot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the same one I'm looking at right here. Beautiful. It shows a master doing their work. And he had done some self-portraits as well too. And he's been with us for a while. Like, it wasn't until 1984 that he was with us. So that's somebody I would have really have liked to meet, but I was just too young at the time. I would have only been about 10 years old or something at that point in life. But yeah, he's a modern day master. And again, with black and white photography and film photography, Zone 5 was this exposure technique where you're achieving the most amount of detail in the highlights and the most amount of detail in your shadows. And you get this really beautiful contrasty image, especially shown in black and white. And there's a way with film actually developing and exposing and developing the film to achieve the maximum results. And again, this was the type of advanced stuff that we were doing just in my photography class in high school, even before I got to college. So it's anyone who's interested in getting into like wildlife photography or scenic photography is a must look at his work. And he was known for doing most of his work in black and white, so like a lot of mountainous areas, a lot of contrasty with forests, etc. And yeah, his stuff is great.
So one of the things I wanted to ask you, since you're talking about Ansel Adams and shooting in black and white, when you're shooting, like certainly if you're working for a customer or a client, you have a brief, you have to shoot things the way they want. And, sometimes like weddings, maybe you have a little bit of leeway, but I want to look at one of your nature shots, and we can kind of look at the difference between it in color and black and white. And I'd love for you to explain why you choose to shoot that way. Why would you choose to shoot black and white versus color?
Yeah, so this shot is Banff, and I took it just in the summertime. It was an absolutely beautiful day. We were very lucky with the weather. And so typically this would be a shot that I would use in color. That's why I myself wasn't fully decided, which is why that's the only shot I sent to you in color and black and white. And typically it would be in color because anyone who's been to Banff National Park in Canada Lake Louise specifically, knows that this water is just like the most incredible turquoise color water, or maybe there's its own shade of green that needs to be invented. There we go. It's really stunning, and even the photo doesn't do it justice as when you see it, with your eye in real person. And then, of course, the beauty of the sky and whatnot. But again, the reason I gave it in black and white is because, coming back to my love for Ansel Adams, you've got this nice dark in the foreground. You've got the tree that just gives it some depth, and it's contrasted by the mountains and these amazing clouds that came by, because for the most part the day was just a non-cloud day. And it was just that right moment where the clouds were coming by and I captured it. So it gives a little detail in the sky as well too. And it just reminded me of how Ansel Adams used to shoot, where he would have these beautiful, darks in the foreground and then the mountains in the background. And I had always wanted to photograph Banff, and in particular, some of the mountains out in the west, like California and BC and Alberta, etc. So I just thought this image would show the differences of the different tones in black and white, and leave a little more up to the viewer to kind of fill in the color. And it just felt right, really, more than anything. Even though the color image is nice, I feel that this image really shows off. It's not quite zone 5. And the other thing too is, this particular day, I actually had to shoot this image with my phone. So it's a little bit of a cheat in that way, because we were doing a little bit of a hike and we didn't have a lot of time to spend at Banff. So I do some music as well too. So I had to make the decision, do I bring all my music stuff for the gig, or do I bring my camera, or do we bring everything? And I didn't have my own car out there, so I just decided to go travel light. And I was very happy with the results. I have a 13 Pro iPhone or whatever it is. So it does take some good high quality images. I would have loved to bring my camera on that day, but that'll be for another day. But pretty good results for a phone. I was happy with the quality of it.
Another one of your, I guess we'll call it nature shots, landscape, nature. It kind of has some still life. Is this one here?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Okay, I saw this and I love this photo. This is great.
Oh, thanks, TJ. So I have a lot of different pictures like this. I love nature and, still life, especially old type of boats and things. I have a whole series that I did when I was on the East Coast. I went a few times this year, and then I went a few times other years. But the reason that I love this image is I went to India earlier this year. I was there for 4 months. And this was, I think, like the second day that I was in India. And I got up really early in the morning because there's a time difference anyway, of about 10 and a half hours. And I did a walk, just like a meditation type of walk with a group. And I saw this image and I just loved it. Like, it's Mayapur, India. I had just gotten there, and it was February and it was cold in Canada, but in India it was, like 12 degrees in the morning. And we did this walk, and I just loved how that, I guess, I don't know if you would call it like a skiff or a rowboat or what, but I just loved the old texture of it sitting there against, like, think of the wood almost like rotting away and old and being used, and it's just sitting there taking a break. And then you have all this wonderful greenery around it that's alive and thriving. And then, of course, all the lily pads and whatnot. And then that mist that, in India, everything always, wherever you go, unfortunately, a lot of it is because of the pollution. But there's almost always like this haze or mist in the sky. And it gives it a rather almost like emotional feeling to all of the images all of the time. So this is more, the image is a nice image. Obviously, for photographers out there that are maybe newer, utilizing rule of thirds, right? I didn't put it on a third on the very bottom or on the top, but I did slightly move it over so the boat is moving into the picture. It draws your eye into the river. So that's what I would say about that image. And again, that's one that, no, actually, I did use my camera. I did have my camera with me that particular day. So I think the only shot I took from the phone was the last shot, the one of Banff.
Nice. Now, is this shot here in India, or is this just an Indian wedding somewhere else?
Yeah. So this one actually is in Vrindavan in India. and I had the opportunity to photograph a wedding there. And Vinay and Kati are friends of mine, and they invited me to their beautiful wedding in Vrindavan in India. And it was a small, intimate wedding. It was at a goshala, which is a word for just like where the cows live and are taken care of in Vrindavan. And this was a traditional Vaishnav wedding. And I think they only had maybe 60 people at their wedding, maybe a little more. It was very small, intimate. It was a beautiful day. I photographed many Hindu and Indian weddings and Sikh weddings. But this particular wedding, obviously, there's the emotion of being invited and being in India and knowing the couple. And this was just one of those moments that we were talking about earlier. I was just walking around discreetly, and they were holding this posture for a few moments. And I was fortunately fast enough to grab it right at that moment. And I mean, you can see all the emotion in the picture. I'm not really doing much. It's the emotion is there because they were just very happy to be back in India and very happy to be getting married. And it's one of my favorite shots that I shot in India in terms of weddings, and maybe one of my favorite wedding images that I've taken in a long time. So I just love all the colors. I love the lighting. There was a canopy above where the wedding took place, but it was essentially outdoors, and the canopy is not so much for the rain as it was for the sunshine because it's very hot in India. So it's more to protect against the sunshine. And
So
for
it's
us,
basically,
yeah,
it's like a built-in diffuser.
I was just going to say, TJ, you know, and other photographers out there will know, basically it's a giant softbox. So, I mean, and this is the whole thing about natural lighting as well, too. When you get situations like this, I basically had the couple unknowingly build a giant softbox for me. So every shot that I took was so diffused and no shadows and this beautiful warm light coming off of them. You know, I didn't really increase the color temperature that much. This is, you know, I don't change my color temperature too much. I usually leave it at 5500 K, but I might, depending if it's a really dark room or whatnot, I might bring it down. But this was just shot at 5500 K, and this is pretty much from the camera. It was just a very beautiful warm light coming in from that softbox. So I just love the shot, and a lot of it probably was due to the lighting and obviously the emotion of the day.
The one thing I noticed in contrast, I've shot, well, I've shot different cultural weddings, but they were all kind of Western weddings.
Right.
We're kind of like a hybrid. But one thing I noticed about like a traditional wedding like this is all the vast color. And then you go to a wedding like a Western wedding, and you have kind of some play with, you know, the groom can have kind of a range of colors that he wears, but it's almost always like a black and white affair, right? And can you talk about maybe the difference between those and what attracts you to each?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the great thing about TJ, you know, when you were here, the great thing about GTA is Greater Toronto area is that I know you probably got listeners from all over, so it's a very multicultural place. You know, I've read statistics before that it's one of the most multicultural places in the world. Obviously, New York City is known for that as well, too. So you get an opportunity to photograph all of these different types of religions and non-religions and weddings and different, you know, traditions that they have. And that's what's really kept me interested as a photographer, photographing weddings for so many years as well, too, because every wedding I go to is usually quite different. And, you know, the dress is quite different. Now, you know, the traditional white wedding is a very Western thing. And, you know, I've heard so many ministers and whatnot at weddings say that the white dress comes back from Elizabeth, the queen before, I think, Elizabeth, but that's not my area of expertise. But it's a traditional thing to have the white wedding. And, you know, usually the guys, as you mentioned, TJ, have like the black tuxedo on. But a lot of people now are mixing it up. They're doing like light blue tuxedos or, you know, white ones or different colors in that. You know, my background is actually Scottish, and Scottish weddings are a lot of fun. You know, there's the kilts and all the colors of all the kilts, and you know, there's different traditions there as well too. When they get married, the couple traditionally are given a horseshoe for good luck. So there's all these different, you know, from Gaelic weddings to have done Zen weddings to traditional Native Indigenous people stage smudge ceremonies. They're all just great. They're all part of learning about different cultures, and they're all great to photograph because it makes it interesting for me. So that's what I really love about wedding photography, is that you're always getting this diversity, especially in the area where I live as well too.
The last summer I mentioned that river when we first started talking. You talked about that one river shot, a Little Smoky River,
Mm-hmm.
and so that property is actually a giant. It's like an outfitting lodges there, so for hunters, and they run an outfitting business there. And so I was staying there last summer, and I happened to be there during the property owner's. He was my friend's son's wedding that was on that property. Up at the river is kind of where they had the altar built and stuff. But this is rural northern Alberta, and they're outfitters, and so of course their vests and stuff were all real tree camo, which is really cool to see.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, and that's a good point too, TJ, right? Like, I can be, for a wedding, especially, I've had the opportunity to go to the Caribbean and different places in Canada and US, but in the GTA, you can be right downtown in the heart of the city, photographing a wedding, and then you can get, all of the details of the buildings and the skyline and whatnot. But then for those that are maybe not from GTA area, with Ontario, you drive an hour or two north or west, and all of a sudden you can be on almost like a ranch. So, I mean, I can get everything from like a very rural type of wedding to a very urban type of wedding, and that makes it a lot of fun as well too. And then there's a lot of popular places around here, Black Creek Pioneer Village and all of these things. We were there. They have the structures of the early settlers coming. So you have this big diversity here. We don't have any mountains like we have out in Alberta or BC, unfortunately, but that's why hopefully I'll get out there to photograph a wedding at some point in the future as well too. It hasn't happened yet, but maybe at some point.
Destination wedding yet, and Banff or whatever the case is. Yeah.
Destination in my own country. I love it.
That's right. Awesome. I just want to touch on, we talked about product photography, and you said this went along.
Yeah.
So how do you set up a shot like this? And is this I guess is obviously a composite of multiple shots put together.
Yeah. So this, thanks for bringing that one up. And the reason I included this shot is because this really shows how you can get into the technical part of lighting and take your time when you're doing product photography. This is a friend of mine's company called U-Drum. He's a great guy, makes amazing drums. And this is an old shot, but he gave me the opportunity to photograph this new line of snare that he was introducing back then. And from a photography and a photographer's standpoint, it's a very difficult product to photograph because you've got all of the sheen and shine on all of the hardware. And then you've got the translucent nature of underneath the drum. So you've got the snare drum, I should say. So, and then I've also wanted to capture the details. So this was good because he gave me the snare and I had it for maybe like a week or something. And it gave me all this time to think about it and try different things and fool around with the lighting. And essentially what I did is I built a tent because I didn't have a tent big enough. I have small tents for jewelry and small products, but I just basically built a tent. And then I used soft boxes to light it in different areas around the tent that took away the most amount of shadows. And all I was really going for here was just a clean image without too much glare on it. You can see on the main shot of the snare drum how it has a little bit of difference in the lighting there compared to the shadow going around, and that just shows the curvature of it. But even to get that took a lot of time of maneuvering with the tent that I built in the soft boxes, and then just trying different angles. I wanted the two shots of the snare drum on the bottom. I wanted the light coming from behind, so it would give a little bit of shadow to bring it off the white seamless background. But again, I included this shot because it's probably one of the product shots have taken the most amount of time to achieve those results. And I used almost the whole entire week that I had with it. And I was very happy with how it came out. I think he was too. And it was just a lot of fun. And of course, I just love anything to do with music. TJ, I know you're a big jazz fan, if I recall correctly.
You recall correctly.
The jazz, jazz is all about the snare. It's a big part, the snare and the ride. And the kick. You have a good snare, a good kick, and a good ride, and the skills and chops, and you can play nice jazz music. So I just like how this particular product piece came out.
That's why I love the photojournalism so much, is you're just capturing what is there. You're not creating anything. You're just being open to the flow of what's going on. And you're capturing a moment frozen in time, just like the improvisation in jazz. And I just related so much to photography in that way. But this photo is exactly what I'm talking about when I say you can look at it and say, oh, it's just a snare drum on white. You just think no big deal. But like you
Right.
just said, it took you it was one of the product shots. It took you the longest to do. It takes painstaking effort. And man, it's a exercise in patience for sure.
It really is. It really is. That's when you can develop discipline and patience. And now that we're talking about it, I don't know if I've ever taken this long to do any product shot. I don't know if I've ever taken longer than maybe an hour or two. It's just that I just really wanted this to be special and come out very nicely. And I knew I could use it in my portfolio. And I just was, I had the great fortune with this piece where I had it for a long time and I knew I did. And that's probably why I included it today, because I've got not millions, I've got many, I should say, probably at least hundreds of different product shots that I've shot. And this one, just always, when I think of product photography, this is one that really stands out to me.
I'm looking at this shot here, and this looks like it. Well, okay, there's a product catalog shot, right? So you're shooting these models. These two people probably don't even know each other. They probably just met, and they're husband and wife cutting strawberries. And so you have to feature a product, and you have to have these people. I guess it's the protein powder. Maybe they're emphasizing here. But yeah, so how do you make this thing look natural? These people that probably don't know each other feature this product appropriately. Like, what's your instruction to them? Like, okay, guys, I'm John. I'm a photographer. Here's what we're going to do. Like, walk me through the shoot.
Yeah, that's such a good eye, because, to think about all of that, because it's so true, everything that you said. This was a product catalog for Shackley. They're a great company out of Burlington, and they needed a product cover that shows everything they do. So they have things like protein powders, healthy green cleaning products, and they wanted to show that in their product catalog that goes out to all of their people that subscribe to their catalog. So to begin with, it made it somewhat easy for me because they knew this is what they wanted. When they approached me to shoot this cover, they knew that they wanted, like a couple on the front, and it's showing off their products, which is the protein powder, I think the knife as well too, and probably even the blender. Like they sell a lot of different products. So I was already like halfway there, where I didn't have to get too creative because I knew that's what they wanted. And they borrowed one of the ladies' kitchens, which she has a beautiful home, and we use that as our backdrop. And TJ, you are right. Probably like 95% of the time, the people coming in, the models, they've never met, or maybe they've worked together a few times. I think I could be wrong, but I think this is the rare case where they actually were husband and wife.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But this shot was done a long time ago. And I think I only included it because I do so much corporate work and commercial work that I didn't want to show too much of that for the sake of the podcast, but I wanted to show some of that work that I do. This would go more like on the commercial side, I guess. And so all I really did, because you're right, how do you make this look natural, right? In the very beginning, I don't think they're professional models. Again, this was a while ago. I just got them talking and laughing, and I got them, like I said, okay, if you're going to be making some protein powder in the kitchen, and you got to go to work and you're in a hurry, but you guys are having some time together. And they were probably we were joking around, and they were probably talking to me and joking a little bit. And I caught that moment. I got the shot when I said, okay, they were smiling naturally. And I said, okay, just look down for a moment. And that's when I got it. So when you're working with, if you're working with professional models, they'll know what to do. I think they've both done modeling before. I can't remember, forgive me. But when you're working with people that are professionals that are always modeling all the time, they'll just naturally move and know where to go. But these guys were great to work with. And, walking you through the shot, I just tried to keep it light and I tried to keep it fun. And it showed in this, like, soon as I got this shot, I knew that was the shot. Like, I'm like, I'll keep shooting, but I'm pretty much done because I know this is the shot. I showed it to the client who was there. I had my computer, I brought it up on the computer, and she said, that's exactly what we want. That's exactly what we're looking for. And I just shot some more for fun. But by this point, I knew that I had the shot because I was just, the entire time, keeping in my mind what the client wanted, and just keeping checking with the client to make sure I'm on the right track. And, for those that want to succeed in corporate photography or commercial photography, there is an element of creative will and creative design. And you sometimes will get clients coming to you saying, I have an idea, but don't know where to go with it. But quite often you'll get creative directors, and you get communications coordinators that know exactly what they want. If you just keep checking in with them, then you'll keep being called back. Because if you can make their vision happen of what they have in their mind, then you're good. And that's why I gave the shot, because it was so much fun this session, and the shot came about very quickly. I think I only shot maybe 5 or 10 images before that. Sometimes I'll shoot just to get people warmed up and comfortable too. And I know that the first 5, 10, 15, whatever shots, I'm just getting them loose and comfortable in front of the camera. And I know I'm not going to use any of them. But I knew when I got this, I'm like, that's what they're looking for. So I guess that's why I included it today, because it was just, some of the corporate stuff is a lot of fun, but it's people speaking and whatnot. But this was just a fun, family friendly activity.
That's awesome when you get to use, when you're working for somebody, whatever the client is, maybe for a creative director, like you said, but you're given that kind of creative control. Because I'd imagine it'd be kind of stifling for someone to say, I want it shot like this way with this. And it's just like, why, okay, if you know so much, why don't you just go do it? Why are you bringing me in? So it's nice when someone appreciates your artistic vision and what you can bring to it,
TJ, that it's funny you say that, because there have been some times where I think to myself, what you just said right there, I think, well, if you know exactly, then and I mean it more in a fun way, like, why would you bring me in? But I understand, because they'll know exactly what they want, but they don't have the technical expertise, and they'll say, I'm not a photographer, so I know what I want, but I want you to, do it this way. And I'm cool with it. I'm cool with it because it actually makes my job a lot easier, because then all I'm doing from there is just asking questions to try and get it closer to their vision. And then you get the total other opposite end of the spectrum, which maybe you've experienced too, TJ, where people will just be like, I have this idea. And the idea is so broad that you try and funnel it down to try and be able to articulate with the camera what it is, the vision that they have in their mind, but they can't fully express what it is that they want. So then you just have to kind of, by trial and error, keep working. I don't mind. Some photographers are big on commercial work and corporate work of, the client not seeing the picture. It depends, maybe not for fashion or whatnot, but I'm okay with it, because we're co-creating everything together. When I'm hired by a brand or a company, we're co-creating that vision for them. So I have no problem having the screen open and showing them what I'm doing, and just saying, is this getting closer, or is this further away? And hopefully, usually if they're saying, well, this is getting closer, but they might see things I didn't see. They might be like, oh, her hair or the tag is showing in the back of her, it could be anything. So, and I'm like, oh, great. I didn't see that. Thank you. I don't do much Photoshop. I try and keep the image as is, but I'm like, that's less work I have to do later, because I don't have to take that out now because I missed it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I find more often than not, I get, I'll ask again, how's this? What do you think about this? I was thinking about this. What do you, is that a good idea? And they always go, you're the expert. It's like, okay, I'm the expert then, I guess.
Yeah, that's such a good point, because I get clients like that too all the time, where they're like, I don't know, that's why I hired you. You're the expert. But see, I know when I get that answer, that's a cue for, okay, your creative vision and creative eye, you pretty much have, the liberty to do what you want to do from there. But I find it's 50-50, and then everywhere in the middle. Sometimes people want me to be creative, but then they have a little bit of an idea of what they want. So I'm just trying to always find that balance, because everyone is different. And then the relationships are important. Once you've worked with a company or a client or a person a certain amount of time, you start to know, I know they're going to like this, or I know they're going to like that, or I know they've said they don't want, A, B, or C, or whatever. So then it starts becoming easier as well too, because you can quickly bring their vision to life, because you've established that relationship and rapport with them.
My secret weapon is actually my wife too, because I'll go through photos.
Sure.
And because I'm colorblind, I have her look over my shoulder, especially if it's just nature stuff, I don't really care. But when it comes to skin tones, I just want to make sure the person's not too orange or whatever, because I can't see that. So she comes in and she helps me do a final color correct. But as I go through photos, she'll be like, oh, like what? No, remove that because there's like a double chin, or she's got a little mustache here, or they won't like their face, or that's an unflattering pose or something. And I'm not looking at the same things. I don't see it the same way. But it's nice to have, I don't want to call it an untrained eye. At this point, she's helped me with thousands of photos, but she looks at it very differently. So it's nice to get that outside perspective to look at things and you kind of make you see things in a way that you haven't really noticed them.
And ditto on that. I'm so fortunate to have a better half where she's always, if there's something I miss, she'll catch it.
Yeah.
and that's why I always say I run it by the editor first.
That's right.
Before I submit things, because I know that, I know that she's very detail oriented. For those that follow astrology, I know you're another one of my favorite Virgos, TJ, and she's also Virgo. And I find, a lot of Virgos, just very generalization, are very good with details. And so I run it by my editor, and she'll, if there's anything there, she'll find it, whether it's color is off or something or lighting, she'll find it. And then I'll be like, yeah, you're right. Yeah, I could change that, or I could adjust that, or I could use a different image.
Usually it's, I argue, no, that's, and then after I'm like, okay, yeah, you were right.
Yeah.
Thank you for catching it before I hit send,
Yeah. So we're very fortunate because I'm so lucky to have an editor in the house that can make sure that, but I forgot, you did tell me that. I forgot that so is it red-green colorblind?
Yeah, yeah. I think it's both red and green. They've, it's different to some varying degree, but any of the kind of where there's red or green, it's a problem. So you're differentiating purple from blue, or pink, or brown and green. Like it's big. It's a mystery.
Yeah, because my grandfather had the red-green color blindness, and I just remember from high school and college photography, red-green are in the same spectrum, right? Yeah. So that's why even in black and white, that's why we use even with black and white, we can use a red filter to really bring out the blues in the skies and bring out the greens because they're at the same color spectrum. So those folks that have red green, it's difficult because of that spectrum. They're seeing the red and green, I guess, like similarly. Mm-hmm. But fortunately, we actually in high school as well too, one of the exercises we did, there's a kit, which TJ, you might know it, you might have done it before. There's a kit where it has all these colors and you have to match them all up by like darkness and lightness. And
the Farnsworth D15.
Yeah, you probably used it then, because I remember that's one of the first things we did in high school photography. I can't remember if that was like second advanced year or first year. And I think the teacher was just trying to see like which students in the class maybe had some color blindness, because there's I guess like a more fuller color blindness that some people have as well too. It's not my area of expertise, but I thought it was really cool that they did that just to see, because obviously the student, when you're getting into color photography, would see things differently, and it would be good to know if they're having some color blindness going in when you're marking them as well too.
There's this one photographer on YouTube, and I should be able to remember his name right now, but I can't for the life of me. But he offered, it was you edit these color photos. He's doing landscapes. Don't know how well it works for skin tones, but he goes into black and white. He edits it in black and white for your contrast, your highlights, all this kind of thing. And he'll go to the color slider and mix it around until he has got a good black and white image. And then he puts it back in color. And that's his kind of method for editing. And it works really well. And I thought, hey, there's some hope for people like me, because I can edit something in black and white, not even paying attention to any of the color really. Use the color sliders. But then when you convert it back into color, for some reason, it just works. So there's a little... I'm gonna have to go find that guy after we get off the chat here.
Sure. Yeah. And I loved your black and white stuff, TJ. I was browsing through some of your images. You had some images where you were, it almost looked like you were using a mirror, or in photography, we call it like mirror image. And I really liked that stuff. It was very contrasty, and it really brought out the character in the subjects that you were shooting. You probably know which images I'm referring to, but
with the one with the one with the trumpet and the bass, and
yeah, I've got it open right here. So there's he's got a trumpet, and then the other guy has a bass guitar, and the guy with the trumpet, it almost looks like it's on top of water. Yeah, because it almost looks like there's like small reeds coming through. But then the image on the bottom has, in the background, it also has the tree branches, which is really cool. And then the guy with the bass as well too. I like that image. And you've done the same technique there, where the shot that's upright, you've got almost like the sky, and then but in the other shot below, you've got again like the trees. So it gives it like that mirror image feel. Yeah, there it is. But at the same time, it slightly tricks you because the top is slightly different than the bottom with your composition and the subject matter that you put in there. So I thought that was pretty cool. I wondered, was that post or did you do that all beforehand?
So I took the picture just obviously as is, trying to get the reflection in the puddle, right? And then the bass player is a bit different than the trumpet. In the trumpet shot, I was able to get him right up to the water's edge so his feet could touch the reflection of his feet.
Nice.
But for the bass player, he was just kind of standing a little bit there. And I still got the reflection, and because you got the graffiti, it's so busy, that photo. So I love just having that reflection all the way around. Right. And then just in post, I didn't plan to flip in post. I remembered the other shot with the trumpet. I was like, I just thought made it look kind of cool, and it made it from an average to above average shot by flipping it, and just kind of you make the person look at it a little bit because they sense that something's off, but until they really study the photo, they can't really realize that it's because it's upside down. And so I tried that with the graffiti shot as well there with the base, and I like the result there because you see like it looks like a sky, but you see like a little imperfection. You're like, what is that? And you realize, oh, that's actually in a puddle.
Because that's what I was thinking. I was thinking because I saw that, I'm like, I think that's a puddle because you can see a little like rocky or imperfection.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what's great about the shot too. It's one of those ones where you want to take a lot of time to explore it, which also makes a great image. And now I can see, looking at it, I've looked at it a few times, but now I can actually see that it was shot in Graffiti Alley, I believe, in Toronto, because you can see the graffiti. And I can see that, it looks like you flipped it. So that's how you got it with the puddle, because it almost looked like you did it in post just because his feet were almost touching. But now I see if you moved him up closer to the puddle, then you can almost get to the point where it looks like they're like touching one another.
Yeah,
it's a cool shot, man. I like that a lot, and I like his expression playing the bass as well too.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, that's Adam Jenkins. Actually, he messaged me to come and teach him, and there's a sax player as well, friend of his. We were in their apartment to do self-defense, and so I was doing private self-defense coaching sessions with them for several months, and then I wanted to shoot some Toronto musicians. I shot Brown Man. I'd shot Andrew McCann, who's the trumpet player in the other photo there. And I thought, what other musicians in Toronto do I know? And so I reached out to Adam. I said, hey, man, you want to get some profile shots done? I want to shoot some musicians. So we went out and did that shot there in Graffiti Alley.
Yeah, it's a great shot, man. And musicians always need images. They're great subject matter. Always. It's not that often you get musicians saying no because they're,
Speaking of people that are always in need of the photo shot, or always get their photos shot, I want to talk about this photo because the file does say event photography.
Right.
But it looks like he's on some type of bus or something. So is this like a candid shot that turned into like a pose? Explain this to me.
Yeah, sure. So everybody knows in Canada that the Raptors won it all in, I forget what year it was now. Guess it was a while ago now after the pandemic. There seems to be like this whole, chunk of everyone's career that's missing because of the years of the pandemic. But anyway, Raptors won it all. They won the championship. They had one of the most incredible parades I've ever seen in my life in Toronto. And it was just crazy, man. It was something like 2 million people in the downtown core, some crazy number like that. And so Sean and I, my better half, we went down early, and I just got in a perfect position. And I thought, my photojournalistic background, I had watched, I think, all the games that season because I was excited that Kawhi Leonard came to the Raptors and they had a good chance to win. I was always a fan and watched some of the games, but that season I watched all of them. And I thought I'll take my camera down. To be honest, I wasn't like hired by someone to get the shots of them, but I knew I could photograph on spec, meaning if I wanted to sell some of the images after, I'd have no problem doing it if I got some good images. And there was just chaos. I have other images of this image, and it was just like thousands, millions of people all in front of us. And Kyle Lowry, of course, him and Kawhi Leonard were really the ones that really helped bring home the trophy for them. And right where I was on University Avenue, I think it was, yeah, the bus actually got stopped because there were just so many people. They couldn't go anywhere. The parade ended up being like an hour or an hour and a half behind schedule because they were going all the way up to Nathan Phillips Square and Old City Hall. And it was just, the bus wasn't going anywhere. It was stuck. And it happened to be stuck right in the spot where I had set up camp. So it was awesome. And you couldn't really move anywhere. So it was great. I had probably like almost 45 minutes, it felt like, just to take as many pictures as I wanted. I had my long lens with me. And Kyle happened to have the trophy at that point. And he had it, and he was just looking around at all the audience and crowd, the way that everyone was. I got amazing pictures of the coach and Kawhi and all the players on the team. And he just happened to, at one moment, he looked over at me. And he probably, I'm sure he wasn't looking at me, but he was looking in my general direction. And I just let the shutter rip. And it's just amazing because he had his sunglasses on. When you zoom in, you can actually see all the people in his sunglasses, and you can see all the crowd in the trophy. And it's just a incredible shot how it came out. I loved every moment of it. And here you have, really, anyone who's a Raptors fan knows that, you know, Kyle was an instrumental part. He was the longest player on the team who had been with Toronto. He brought home the cup for the team. It was the first time, or the cup, I'm thinking hockey here. He brought home the trophy for the team, and it was the first time that it was brought home outside of Canada. So it was important to our whole country. And it was just an awesome day. And, you know, again, I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. There's some photography sense there, but a lot of times they're just, you know, that sense of being in the right place at the right time. And I had all this opportunity to get the shots I wanted. And it looks like for a moment I was alone with Kyle Lowry while he was hoisting the trophy. And for that split moment, it felt like that.
You're right. It's a lot of it is being there, right? You gotta be there to take the shot. But then I look at the license or serial number of the bus there. I look at the girl in the bottom left of the sunglasses. I see the hands coming on the right, like all that kind of context and those outer elements of the frame. I even look up to the top left where you have the arch reflection. And I just look at this and I think, and then where he's placed, this is just a perfectly composed photo. And so and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think you're looking at him and being like, okay, I got all these elements in the frame and I'm going to frame it like this. It's just, you take the shot. But of course, subconsciously, all that went into your split-second decision of shooting this, right? Your eye kind of sees the reflections up in the side and it sees the stuff on the edge of the frame and how to place it. And without really maybe consciously thinking it, you hit that shutter and you have your shot. So can you talk about that?
Yeah, sure. That's a really great point. Sometimes what you're shooting for, especially with sports, and again, they're not playing the game right now, but it's still sports related. Sometimes what you're doing is you're just looking more for the reaction or the action or what's happening. So for this particular reason, you're correct, TJ. I was more, Kyle was looking all around. The whole Raptors, I mean, even the coach, don't know why I can't think of his name right now. He was, they were just like blown away. They were looking everywhere, being like, I could tell what was going through their head because I was so close to them. They're like, I've never seen anything like this. Maybe I won't ever see anything like this ever again in my life. So I need to enjoy it because there's like 2 million people downtown, all cheering for them, all happy, all celebrating. So what I was looking for in this moment is a moment where Kyle would look at me because everyone's yelling, Kyle, Kyle, Kyle. But I was looking more, concentrating on like 100% razor sharp, one pointed focus, just waiting, holding the camera there for the longest time. And the moment he looked, I got it. And I might not have had another opportunity to get that shot. But then to your point, TJ, when I got back, I have shots that just have him framed and, not the hands as much and not the lady. And at first I'm like, well, that will be the shot. And then I thought, but it's actually really cool. Like, and I did no cropping on that shot. It's really cool the way it is because then it makes the viewer wonder, like, okay, well, who's that lady in there and who is the other hands and what's going on in this shot? And of course, for those that were there, or those that are Raptor fans, they rented these double-decker buses and, the roof is open on the top and they put the players in the double-decker buses on the top. And the players were just having a good time. They were having like, something to drink and a nice meal. And they were just enjoying themselves. I think there were 4 or 5 double-decker buses and a little bit of their entourage. They had a whole bunch of different, like musicians and celebrities there as well too. And in other shots, I had captured their interaction with the other team members and other people that were on the buses behind them. And it was just a fun day. It was very family friendly. There were lots of kids around, and that's really what I was thinking about more so is Kyle looking at me. Like if I could just get a shot of him looking, because every other shot, to the side was still good, but to have him looking right at me or over me or what with the sunglasses, I knew it would be easy to get if he just looked for a moment. And that's the example, kind of going back to what I was saying earlier in the podcast, is that sometimes you only have like a split moment to get the shot. And he never looked over again, at least while I was standing in that position from my perspective. He never looked over at me again. If I had missed that shot, then I would have had some pretty mediocre shots of him looking forward with the trophy. But everything worked out really well.
Hey, one thing I'd love for you to detail if you can. You mentioned when you were talking about going out getting those shots, you knew you'd be able to sell some of them for spec.
Yeah.
So how do you then go and as just some random person of the public, I guess, taking your shots to go and sell them? Because like I remember we had the wildfires up here and I shot some of the wildfire stuff, and I had a couple of news agencies like Reuters Business and then CBC that contacted, hey, can we use these? You sign away your rights, and then they just put them up on their broadcast or on their page or whatever.
Yeah.
So you go out to an event like this and you take some sure shots. You weren't commissioned to do it. How do you then go about marketing those shots to sell them to make some income?
Yeah, sure. Great question. Back in the days when I was with the Toronto Star Corporation, I worked with them, and they own Metroland, which at the time had something like 30 or 35 newspapers, mainly west of there. But I had so many contacts, it was easy. If I went in, back in the day, we call it shooting spec, just meaning you weren't commissioned or hired to go and shoot this job. But if you're interested in something, why not? So I would shoot a lot of things back in the day, and then I would just contact my contacts, be like, hey, did you get a shot of whatever band are coming through or whatever sports event? And sometimes they'd be like, yeah, no, we're good. We had someone out and cover it. Or sometimes they'd be like, no, we're using like AP or CP or Reuters or whatever. And then other times though, you would just get lucky and they'd say, actually, yeah, we could use a shot. Our photographer went out and he or she got some good shots, but they didn't exactly get that particular shot that you have. So back in the day, I always used to get, places just paying for the image, pay per play, like pay for that shot. Now that I'm not as involved with the, media as much as I used to be, it's just a matter of contacting some places that are, pretty reputable places. You can start usually with your local place, because they'll usually, that was such a big event that, even local papers usually have more of a jurisdiction and mandate just to cover like a local angle. But because it was such a big event that they might actually publish it as well too. So I would start there, just your reputable local newspapers and agencies, and then you can go online, just places in your surrounding areas, and just reach out. And it gives you an opportunity to connect and kind of get your foot in the door and reach out and meet them too. This particular case, I didn't put too much time into it because I wanted to go down as someone who was a little bit of a fan. And now that I got the shot, it's a cool shot to have in the portfolio. But that would be the way to approach it. It's so easy now with online, just, looking up who the director of photography is at a place and just sending them the shot. And if they really like the shot as well too, they might say, well, we had it covered, but hey, this is a really great shot. And then there's usually like a standard fee that they'll pay per shot. Like each newspaper, depending how big they are, if they're like a weekly or a daily, or, I mean, I guess there can even be some publications that are, monthly or bi-monthly. They'll usually have a policy of how much they pay for pictures if it's shot on spec, and they'll tell you what it is that they want to pay for it.
So you just came back from India. You are going to be coming back to Alberta sometime soon.
Yeah, I can't wait.
What things are you up to right now? What kind of projects do you have on the go?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, last 2-3 weeks have been really busy. I was at Queen's Park doing an event. I had a few corporate events I was doing. I had a model actor session I was doing. What else have I done? I had, obviously it's the festive time of year, so I had a lot of Christmas parties at this time of year as well too. Companies having their Christmas party gatherings. So it's been keeping me really busy, and more than anything, so many photographers know how much editing is involved once you're shooting that much content. You spend a lot of time when you're not shooting, then you spend a lot of time just at your desk editing. So I'm doing a lot of that right now as well too.
Awesome. John Bauld. John, I appreciate you coming on today. So it's so great to catch up with you. It's been a while, certainly since I left Ontario, and I'm just really happy to see you healthy and happy and doing well, and still out there shooting as much as ever. And just really appreciate giving us the time of day today, and giving the audience some of these great insights into how to kind of push it even during during hard times. In the photography business. So thank you for that. Is there anything else you want to add? Anywhere you want to direct people to go and check out your work?
Sure. And first, I'd just like to say, TJ, thanks for having me on the podcast. I really enjoyed the podcast, and it's great to see how much success you're having with it. You've had some really great guests on. I'll be an avid listener. And I just also want to say it was so great. We've been trying to catch up for such a long time together now. Just get out and have a tea or something. And now that you're in Alberta, I'm glad we had this opportunity. Sure, yeah. Everyone can find me just on my name, johnbauld.com. And all my social media is under the same as well too. Last name is Bauld. You can check out some of my work. And I really hope sooner rather than later, TJ, I'll be seeing you up in Alberta, and we can get our cameras out and have some fun. So I'm thinking maybe next spring, I want to try and get back out there again. So we have a van, and we're just, doing some work on it, trying to get it. It's running very nicely, but just trying to get it set up so that we can maybe get out and do some more road trips, BC, Alberta, in the summertime. And I might be off to India again in January, February, but I'll certainly be back in Canada in the warmer months. And thanks to all the listeners who are listening as well too. And feel free to reach out also as well too, just if you have any questions about, my work or anything I can help with photography as well too, because I think it's important with anything that you do also to always remain like a fan of it. And so that's why talking about Ansel Adams today was good for me, because it takes it back to the roots of why I started this whole thing 32 years ago or whenever it was anyway. So a lot of fun.
Awesome, man. I appreciate your time, and we'll talk soon. And until then, take lots of photos.
Will do. Thanks, DJ.
Bye-bye.